So those of you who follow my videos that I post know that I do a lot of interviews with a lot of people, and I've done a lot of interviews, and many connected to Vietnam warriors, because that's my generation. And it still affects my generation and the generation that came after it. So Ken wrote me this email and he expressed feelings about his dad. And I chose to talk with Ken about that. So I want you to tell me what your father did and saw in Vietnam.
My father was the Navy corpsman, and he was attached to the Marine Infantry Division. And they would walk around all day, as he put it, looking for a firefight. I mean, it was aggressive, crazy guys. He was in a jungle in Vietnam where if a bullet didn't get you, a snake did, or maybe quicksand did, or maybe a tiger did. And so his job was to run for the fallen, Marines when they were hit. And it could be in the middle of a firefight, they'd yell out, "Doc." And he had to low crawl in there, and he would say, "All I had was a .45 pistol on my side and a bandit with the medical cross." And I had to crawl in the middle of all this fire and explosions and bullets coming in. And it was up to him to administer on the spot first aid. And oftentimes he wasn't able to save the combatants. And that haunted him to his very last days. He died in 2012. So his experience was horrific.
How did he describe what that felt like to you when he finally did describe it?
What haunted him most, he remembers the first young Marine that died in his arms. He described him, he was a blonde-haired boy with blue eyes, and he saw the life just dissipate from his body, and his eyes were still wide open. He said, "I'll never forget those eyes as long as I live." And they'd be screaming and pulling on his uniform, saying, "Doc, save me." Or even worse, more emotional, he described when a buddy was hit and his battle buddy was holding the injured Marine in his arms, screaming at the doc, my father, to save him. Do something. Do something. You got to save him. Sometimes he was able to patch him up, other times not.
When your dad came home, I've heard this story so many times, could he find a way back to his former self?
When my father returned, I had vague memories of him being a fun guy before when I was a little kid. When he returned, slowly but surely, I started noticing that there was something different about Daddy. He would just sit there and stare, and they have a name for that now. He had the 1,000-yard stare. And he'd be jumpy if we ran around as kids, if you ran too close to him, or if you darted out of his peripheral, he would jump and really be started, So little things. But as I got to be a teenager, his condition got worse and our reaction to him got worse. I feel so bad now looking back at how my sister and I especially thought about it. We didn't understand what had happened to him. He just seemed like a crazy guy once we were teenagers. It was in 1997. I remember that I was visiting him. He was living in the Pittsburgh area, the Verona Park area, and he would go to the VA center to see he started receiving treatment then with a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist told me, I walked Dad into the door, and afterwards when I picked him up, the psychiatrist first said, your father's been through a lot. On a scale of 1 to 10 of violence and horrific scenes and experiences, your father experienced a 13. Because my father's from the old school, When I was a little boy, it was boy do this, boy do that. Like you weren't even seen until now I'm a man. So I guess he felt more comfortable talking to me. I'm in my 30s now with my own family, my own military career, mind you. He started saying to me different stories. He told me about the one boy that he could not save, the first one that died in his arms. He told me another story about he had a tight buddy that was also from Philadelphia area, that they were sitting at a tree one time. There was a firefight going on in the distance. They were smoking a joint, trying to dull the pain. And the buddy says to my dad, hey, man, I'm going to go get some of this to run into the firefight. But they always had a pact right up front that if something happened to the other one, and the one that survived would deliver a message to the other's family. So this buddy raced into the firefight. You know, my father followed in, and it got so bad, the boy got killed, his friend. That struck him. That was just terrible for him. He had to go give the news to his mother once he returned. He was just telling me, you never know when it's your time and you're in a war zone or even out on the street. He would emphasize to me, there is no safety, there is no security. You think, even because you're here in the suburbs, you know, anything could happen out here too. Always be prepared mentally.
You go to the cemetery once a year, speak to the man. What would you say to him about things if you could?
Every year, at least on his birthday in August, I dress in a suit and tie. I drive to the Arlington Cemetery where he's buried. He had an Army military burial with the flyover airplanes and everything, and the trumpeters playing taps. So I visit him, just he and myself. I sit in a lawn chair. Too bad I can't smoke a cigar, but I talk to him. And the first time I did, the year after he passed, I just said to him, man, I'm sorry I didn't understand, you know, that he was so hard on me as a little boy. You know, there were no excuses. Matter of fact, that was another saying, no lies, no excuses. A man tells no lies, makes no excuses. He wouldn't allow me to sleep past 9 o'clock on a weekend. It didn't matter if I just worked the night before, you know, and he just, as I look back, he poured himself into me. In those days, you bonded with your father by working. You know, it was always, he called my mother, your mama wants a brick walkway in the back. That we were going to go lay bricks. Your mama wants a brick wall around her flower bed. And we was always work. You know, go rake the leaves. Or, you know, one point in the story, I said to him, to his gravesite, I said, Dad, I never forget. I must have been about 10 years old where my bike was malfunctioning of some sort. I remember exactly what it was. And he was washing his car with a cigarette dangling in his mouth. And I said, Daddy, will you help me fix my bike? He just looked over at me, fix your own bike. Man, as a 10-year-old, I thought that was the meanest thing he could say. You didn't talk back to your parents in those days like I hear kids today. What I said to him in my mind, I let him have it. But then, you know, I went in to try to fix my bike. David, a long story short, 2 years later, by the age 12, 13, I was a bike master. We were customized building bicycles, me and my buddy Elliot and the other guys. But when I look back, he knew I would figure it out. But by the time I was 17, I was like I was a mechanic. And along the way, from the time I was 10 to 17, I had accumulated my own tools. Because in the middle of that, he told me I would always take his tools. It's funny how a kid, you think things are wrong, they're the right thing. I would take his tools and never remember to bring them back or hang them on the pegboard. He'd get mad and finally said, don't touch my tools anymore. So that ended up me having my own toolbox. I would borrow a crescent wrench from this guy. And in our neighborhood, the men all built cars and hot rods. This is the 70s. You know, oh, you need it. I got an extra tool, kid. You need this. Next thing I know, I got a little toolbox at age 13. So I am handy with tools. At 17, I keep my toolbox in my junker car, and I could repair the brakes. I remember the starter wouldn't work, and I'd hit that solenoid underneath. I was turning into a mechanic, and I talked to him at his tombstone, and I said, man, I understand now. You poured yourself into me. Like I tried to do to my sons. You know, there's too much distraction with kids today. They didn't want to learn anything. But that was a good example of how I think of my father. And the last story, I've got to say this one. I remember I used to rake the leaves in our front yard. We lived in Hawaii on a naval base, Iroquois Point. It was naval housing at that time. It was just like a haven for a child like me. I went barefoot. We had lagoons and a raw beach. And so my job, one of my chores was to rake the front yard of the leaves. It was banana trees, and those leaves were huge. One day he comes back with his car, and he says to me, he's got a gift for me, a present. And I'm thinking to myself, I have to be about 8 years old. wow, Dad's got a present for me. He never brings presents. That's not the kind of guy he is. What? My mind is racing. He's smiling. He's so proud of himself, man. I mean, in a split second, I'm thinking, man, it must be a football, must be a baseball. No, it's, I'm thinking of this toy, that toy. He comes up with his hands behind his back and he hands it to me so proudly, and it's a rake, a yard rake. I'm thinking to myself, you gotta be kidding me. Again, my little 8-year-old, 9-year-old mind wanted to curse him out. And he says to me, now you can get the yard done twice as fast and you can get out and play with the guys. But in his mind, that was a good thing. I didn't understand that until I turned 40 or 45, until I had my own kids. I said, he really, all that time, I thought he was gaslighting me. He was sincere. Now I can do my chores faster and hurry up and get outside and play. That was his mindset.
In your dad's lifetime, your lifetime, did he ever get the chance to show you that he admired what you were doing in life and how you were doing it?
My father, growing up, I wasn't even sure he cared about me, or loved me. I know, I mean, he fed me, but it just wasn't that mushy stuff. Man, I had 2 sisters and my mother. In fact, he was guardian of his women. He would get in my face and say, look, man, I know, that's your mother, but you messing with my wife. You keep messing around, you're going to have to go. I'm all 8 years old. I'm thinking, go where? And he drilled it in my head as a little kid. Look, my daughters can always come back home. You mess up, he'd say it in more graphic language to even as an 8-year-old. You F up, you got to go. So that was clear to me. I'm always in my mind, you're a boy, you're going to have to go. So David, when I was leaving for the Army, my father had started drinking during this time. He'd really digressed personally. He looked at me, he tied one on. He came from the neighborhood bar. He was tipsy, red eyes, bloodshot eyes. And he told me, I love you, son. And a tear went down his cheek. It was like my last week there at home. And I'm thinking, wow, he really does. He cares about me. He loves me. It was shocking. Fathers just didn't say that in those days. And as I would, I started to progress in my own military career. I was moving up fast. And when I'd come to visit him, the one thing he would always, we looked like twins. And this is a picture of my father. He was when he first joined the Navy, he's just a kid here, probably 18 years old. But as I grew to be in my 30s, he was in his 50s, we looked like twins. I mean, today I'm his spitting image, even my mannerisms. But people would say, you guys are either brothers. I know you're related. You can't be father and son, but he'd put his arm around me and he'd say, I haven't done too many things right in life, but I got this one right. And he would put his arm around me with such pride and look at me, and I would warm up. And he was so proud of the man I had become. He would just say, you're one hell of a man. That meant something coming from my father. Not many people impressed him. So yes, he thought well of his son, and I'm proud to say that to this day.
Well, I don't know how to thank you for this because I'm honored. A great man, your father. Those values we know, you and I, being men, raising children, how important they are. And maybe he didn't do it in the easiest way, and I'm sure you did it in an easier way. But at the end of the day, what a great man and what a great job. And your mother, too, of course. We didn't even talk about her. So thank you again.
I want to thank you. This came as a surprise that you offered this to me. And yes, my father did a great job, maybe not the easy way. I did things easier, but his way, as I look back, was more effective.